Ever since Netflix announced that they were canceling Daredevil after 3 seasons and leaving the show on a relative cliffhanger, there's been a hole inside me that just can't be filled. Wait, no, that sounded dirty. Let me try that again.
Okay, we're done here.
There is a cavernous void in me, and nope, still dirty. I miss the show, that's what I'm trying to say, like a lot. Anyway, with a number of the characters from the show gaining some buzz in recent weeks, we thought now would be a good time to revisit the show and take a look at 25 things you missed in Daredevil. Spoiler warning, there will be Daredevil spoilers in this video. While it was unclear whether Daredevil was canon or not, the show still made sneaky references to the MCU, with some of the biggest events and locations being referenced in the background, which we will be discussing multiple times in this video. Take, for example, the Avengers Tower. New York is an important part of Daredevil, and the city is a character in its own right, so when promoting the 3rd season of the show, some of the city's skyline could be seen in the background of the moving poster, and if you look closely, you'll notice that Avengers Tower is one of those buildings. Now, while at the time of Season 3, the Avengers had deserted the tower and moved to a compound upstate, with the tower sold to a wealthy benefactor, possibly even Fisk, it is a nice touch to see the tower in the background. Also, just putting it out there, one of the best buildings to scale in the Spider-Man game. Of course, it wouldn't be a Marvel project without having a cameo from the legendary Stan Lee, and Daredevil was no different, although it was admittedly much more discreet than some of his MCU ones. If you look closely in the background in the 13th episode of Season 1, you'll see a picture of Lee in a sort of memorial plaque on the wall of the 15th Police Precinct. It's a touching ode to an absolute legend. Honestly, James Wesley was one of my favorite characters in Daredevil, and the way the guy oozed charisma while always remaining calm and calculated made for a perfect right-hand man for Fisk. And in my opinion, he was gone way too soon, but then again, so was the show. But anyway, one of his best moments is when he casually drops references to both Iron Man and Thor when he questions why the Russians are getting beaten so easily by the Man Without Fear, saying, maybe if you had an iron suit or a magic hammer, that'd explain why you keep getting your asses handed to you. But Wesley forgets that the explanation for Daredevil beating them so badly is that he is a certified badass. Now this reference is a little more contentious, but we're gonna put it in here nonetheless. In one scene where Matt is sitting on a bench, a poster behind him reads, "You don't have to reveal your identity to help solve violent crimes." This is somewhat ironic, as that is basically what Daredevil does, but could this also be a subtle reference to Civil War? The Civil War storyline focused on the superheroes having to register and have their true identity be made public with the Sokovia Accords. So this could be a subtle nod to that, but who knows? While some of the references to the MCU in this video are pretty discreet, others are not so subtle. In fact, Feige directly name-drops Captain America in Episode 9 in Season 1 when he delivers the line, "I could say I'm Captain America, but that doesn't put wings on my head." You hear that, John Walker? Just because you say you're Captain America doesn't mean you are! Moving back to the more subtle references in the background, if you look at the shipping containers that were used to bring Black Sky to the US, you may notice some Japanese text on the side. The translation for the words reads Asano Robotics, which in the comics was created by Yoshida Asano to get revenge on Tony Stark for his father Howard's work in the Manhattan Project. The company also has ties to Steel Serpent, who is of course a villain in Iron Fist, but the less we talk about Iron Fist, the better. Back to the MCU references now, there are multiple references to the Avengers, and in particular the Battle of New York, which is unsurprising, seeing as it took place right on Daredevil's doorstep. For example, the moment Foggy and Matt talk to a realtor about how they can afford their new office thanks to all the destruction and the incident, which makes multiple mentions of the battle itself.
Incident, is that what we're calling it now?
Well, it sounds so much better than death and destruction raining from the sky, nearly wiping Hell's Kitchen off the map.
In fact, this actually allowed the likes of Fisk to step in and rebuild the city the way he wanted. Another reference to the Battle of New York comes in the newspaper articles in the background of Ben Urich's office, with Ben presumably reporting on the events that took place. Daredevil isn't the only Marvel show in New York to make reference to the infamous battle, with Hawkeye making multiple references with the plaque in honor of the Avengers, as well as the Rogers musical, which I would love to see a full version of, even if it does also make me wonder if Thanos was right. But while Hawkeye makes references to the Battle of New York, Daredevil may have made a reference to Hawkeye and Clint Barton himself. In the background of Fogwell's gym, we can see a poster with the name Barton on it, a potential reference to the Master Marksman. Ooh, also, quick question for comic book fans, who do you reckon has the better accuracy, Hawkeye or Bullseye? I'm genuinely curious. Now, while we didn't get the Daily Bugle in the MCU until Far From Home, we did get one recurring media company in the MCU, WHIH News. This news company has rocked up in The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Eternals, Black Widow, WandaVision, as well as Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and of course, as we're talking about it here, they've also shown up in Daredevil, as well as some of the other Netflix Marvel shows, such as The Punisher, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage.
Thank you for watching.
Season 1 of Daredevil culminates in a brilliant battle between Daredevil and Fisk, as the two finally have an epic showdown. But before they get to duke it out, as Fisk and Vanessa try to escape the city, Fisk is taken to a drop site in a Summerville department store's truck. In the comics, Summerville Department Stores is a company whose owner was rescued by Frank Castle from a group of kidnappers. Also, the truck Fisk is in before the Summerville one is Atreus Plastics, which in the comics is a company involved in the creation of high-grade plastic explosives. Now, it's not just Marvel and comic book references the show makes, but it also pays homage to classic movies as well. While the hallway fight scenes are definitely inspired by the likes of Old Boy and The Raid, they also make a subtle nod to Sidney Lumet's satirical black comedy drama Network. In the episode Reunion, Fisk holds a press conference professing his innocence, but is met by a mob of angry protesters. One of those protesters has a placard reading, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore," which is undoubtedly a reference to a quote from Network.
"I'm as mad as hell and I'm not gonna take this anymore!"
The show makes several references to the comics and their storylines, with them paying many references to the Guardian Devil story, where Benjamin Poindexter, aka Bullseye, threatens Karen Page in a church. In the comics, Karen steps in the path of a projectile heading towards Daredevil and dies as a consequence. However, this is altered in the show, as Bullseye is actually going after Karen when Father Lantom selflessly sacrifices his own life by intercepting the baton hurtling towards her. As we mentioned, the show ends on somewhat of a cliffhanger, as Poindexter properly transitions into the role of Bullseye after having his badly damaged spine infused with Cogium Steel. The lead surgeon here is Kenji Oyama, who also patches up Bullseye in the comics, but the thing the show leaves out is that Bullseye is actually supposed to be fixed up with adamantium, which is of course the same indestructible metal that coats the skeleton of Wolverine. The show likely had to go with Cogium Steel, a more obscure substance in Marvel lore as opposed to adamantium, because at the time the rights were owned by Fox, but with Disney now acquiring Fox, that'll likely no longer be an issue. One of the most upsetting things about all this licensing nonsense and different companies having rights to different properties is that Daredevil and Spider-Man, who are close collaborators in the comic books, haven't been able to kick ass together on screen. Now, we're not going to talk about No Way Home and the rumors of whether or not Daredevil shows up, as at the time of this video, the movie has only just recently come out. But we can say that the Netflix series does make a reference to not just one Spider-Man, but two. Similar to the Barton Easter egg, in Season 3, a poster for Parker vs. Morales can be seen in the background. Continuing on with the whole boxing poster Easter egg thing, in Season 1 we see a promotion for a fight involving Matt's father battling Jack Murdock with Carl Crusher Creel. For those who are unaware, Crusher Creel is the civilian alter ego of the supervillain the Absorbing Man, with one of his powers being that he can take on the properties of whatever he touches. One Daredevil villain who does make an appearance in the show, although not as his supervillain alter ego, is Melvin Potter, Daredevil and Fisk's costumer and tailor extraordinaire. In the comics, Potter goes by the alter ego Gladiator, with him making his first comic book appearance in issue number 18, with a story by Stan Lee and the art by John Romita Sr. Gladiator does eventually reform, though, and becomes one of Daredevil's main supporters, and the show combines aspects of early Gladiator storylines with later ones. While the show never explicitly calls Potter Gladiator, the show's creators do hint at his true identity a few times, most notably by having costume sketches laying about, as well as Gladiator's signature circular saws on hand as weapons. Going back to the references to live-action Marvel projects, in the New York Bulletin offices again, we see the framed headline Cybertek settles hanging from the wall. For any fans of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you'll know that Cybertek is the company behind Project Deathlock, with the cyborg Deathlock, who is portrayed by J. August Richards, appearing in the 11th episode of the series. But this isn't the only connection between Daredevil and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., with the biker gang, the Dogs of Hell, also being a shared entity. In Daredevil, the Hell's Kitchen chapter find themselves threatening Foggy before getting their butts whooped by DD during the famous hallway sequence of the second season. However, the gang first appeared in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when the Nevada chapter takes on the agents thanks to the Asgardian Lorelei, with her effectively using the gang as her own personal army. Another connection between Daredevil and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. comes with St. Agnes Orphanage. In Daredevil, this is the place Matt was staying before he was eventually picked up by Stick to undergo training. It also just happens to be the same orphanage that Skye from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was staying at for a while. Maybe they knew each other. Going back to comic book references told through dialogue, as Fisk, Vanessa, and Owlsley attend a fundraising gala, Owlsley says the line, because of the advice he got from Van Lunt and his crackpot astrologer, in reference to a senator. Now this line is a reference to comic book character Cornelius Van Lunt, who is a successful billionaire criminal mastermind with an obsession with astrology. This obsession eventually leads him to find the Zodiac, a cartel of criminals thematically linked to horoscope vocabulary. Speaking of Owlsley, in the comics, the character, who goes by the name The Owl, was actually one of Daredevil's first supervillains, and was his main rival before being replaced by Kingpin. The comic character is a little more menacing than his on-screen counterpart, as the Owl ingested a special serum which enabled him to naturally glide for short distances, left him with hollow bones, gave him superhuman sight and hearing, as well as enhanced strength, resiliency, and reflexes. He enjoys eating live mice with his vintage $600 wine. You know, the finer things. Going back to Gladiator and his costume designs, in his workshop we can see some metal stilts in the corner of the frame. In the comics, these stilts are worn by the aptly named Stilt-Man, with many different people wearing the impenetrable suit of armor with powerful telescopic legs. One of the people to wear the suit was Turk Barrett, the lowlife who Daredevil has sent to jail numerous times on the show. Maybe, if we had a Season 4, he would have found himself in the armor. Who knows? As we mentioned earlier, the avocados at law, Nelson and Murdock, managed to get themselves an office due to the destruction caused by the Battle of New York. But their choice of location, and in particular their neighbors, are what makes their office even more interesting. Across from their office is a door reading Atlas Investments, which is a direct reference to Atlas Comics, which was the name that Marvel went by before they changed their name. Fans will likely be aware that Rosario Dawson's character Claire is better known as Night Nurse in the comics, but you may not have caught a reference she makes to someone else's alter ego. When she first finds Matt lying bleeding and half dead, she calls him Mike, but this isn't just a random reference, it's actually a callback to a weird alter ego that Matt created for a while in the comics. Matt claimed that Mike was his twin brother who for some reason happened to be a creepy, obnoxious douche, and thankfully this character was stopped very soon after it started. Going back to big Marvel corporations now, another reference we see in the show is to that of the Roxxon Corporation, the petroleum industrial conglomerate, which has a long history in Marvel lore, with Asano Robotics actually being a subsidiary of them. Roxxon has appeared in all 3 Iron Man movies, as well as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and, of course, Daredevil. "Oh, look at this," he says, tapping his invisible wristwatch. "I still have some time, so I'm gonna give you lucky lot some more Daredevil quickfire facts." The black costume Matt wears in Season 1 and then again in Season 3 is similar to the outfit Daredevil wears in Frank Miller's The Man Without Fear, which was an alternate retelling of Daredevil's origin. When discussing the fundraiser gala with Fisk, Owlsley remarks that they should make sure Richmond's on the guest list. He won't come, but he'll get pissy if he isn't invited. which is a reference to Kyle Richmond, who eventually becomes the hero Nighthawk. The red and yellow robe used by Battlin' Jack Murdock is reminiscent of Daredevil's original yellow costume in his first appearance, and most notably Daredevil Yellow. Before Charlie Cox was cast, Michael C. Hall was rumored to play Matt Murdock, although he had said that they were just rumors. Oh, and this one doesn't have to do with the Netflix show as such, but while Daredevil isn't part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe proper, without the original 2003 movie, the MCU may not have ever happened. It was during the filming of that movie that Jon Favreau, who played Foggy in the film, first talked to Marvel about directing Iron Man. And finally, when Fisk is changing into his comics-accurate white suit, eagle-eyed fans will spy his father's cufflinks, which he used to wear for symbolic purposes, resting near the pair he ultimately selects. Fisk had seemingly finished wearing them, but has apparently not thrown them away just yet and still keeps them close.